Chapter 2. Can You Steal? Srulik was an athletic boy with long legs. Soccer was a game he had learned to play back on a muddy field in Blani. He and his friends had used the same kind of ball, a tin can wrapped in rags. There were 8 boys playing. Srulik made 9. One boy volunteered to sit the game out so that Srulik could join in. Though it was hot, the boy was wearing a grown-up's tattered jacket that was too big for him and made it hard to run. After a while, the boys stopped the game and stood looking at Srulik and whispering. Then they formed a circle around him and studied him more carefully. "He's thin enough," the biggest boy said. "He'll fit," said someone else. "Fit where?" Srulik asked. "Are you hungry?" the boy in the jacket asked. "Yes," Srulik said. He had forgotten that he was. "Mosheli," the big boy said to the boy with the jacket. "Give him a piece." Now Srulik saw that the pockets of the jacket were bulging. Mosheli glanced up and down, saw that no one was watching, took out a sausage from one pocket and a pocket knife from the other, and cut a thick slab of it for Srulik. He hadn't had such a treat in a long time. "Stick with us," the big boy said. "When it's dark, we'll lower you through a basement window into a store that has more sausages like this one. It's too small for any of us to fit through, but you might make it. Can you steal?" Srulik shrugged. He could steal. He could do anything for more sausage. "I want some more," he said. "Should I give him some more, Yankel?" "Give him some," the big boy said. The boy went on playing until it began to get dark. Then they hid their ball underneath a pile of junk and set out on the run, darting around the pedestrians in the street. When they reached a bricked-up doorway, they stopped to wait for the night curfew to begin. From the way the streets were emptying, they knew it would be soon. Meanwhile, Mosheli took out the sausage and cut a piece for everyone. When they had eaten, he took out some cigarettes and matches, cut each cigarette in half, and passed the halves out importantly. The 2 biggest boys each got his own cigarette. "Do you smoke?" Mosheli asked Srulik. "No. You have to if you want to join the gang." His brother David had once tried getting him to take a drag on a cigarette. It was bitter and made him cough and choke. "I'd rather not," he said. "Leave him alone," Yankel told Moshel. A well-dressed man passed by. One of the boys approached him and said, "Please, mister, can you spare some change? We're hungry." The man looked at them and snapped, "You bums! How come you have enough money for cigarettes?" The street was soon deserted. It was time to go into action. The store they planned to break into faced an alleyway. The window was very small. "Start shouting," Yankel said. All the boys began to shout as if they were fighting. Under the cover of the noise, Yankel took a stone and smashed the window. Someone looked down from the top floor and yelled, "You bums, get out of here!" "All right, ma'am," Moshel said. They moved off and came back a few minutes later. Yankel struck his hand through the window and removed the broken glass. Then Srulik was tied to a rope. He wriggled through the window, and Yankel lowered him in carefully. "Hey, Red," he called softly, "leave the rope on and coil it around you. Tell me what you see down there." Srulik tried to make out his surroundings, but it was too dark to see anything. "Nothing," he called up. "Moshel," Yankel said, annoyed. "Why didn't you give him a box of matches? Why didn't you give him one yourself?" A box of matches landed on the floor. Srulik groped for it, found it, and lit a match. "Do you see any sausage?" "No," he said. "Just bottles." "Vodka?" "How can you tell?" "It says." "I can't read." "Pass one up through the window." He found a chair, put it beneath the window, stood on it, and reached as high with the bottle as he could. "Great. How many more like these are there?" "I see 2. There might even be more in the closet, but it's locked." "Look for cigarettes." It wasn't very different from going through the garbage with his mother, but the results were better. Cigarettes, matches, several bottles of vodka, and 2 whole sausages hidden under the counter. Yankel told him to put the cigarettes and matches in his pocket and pass up the end of the rope. "Quick!" Srulik was yanked upward just in the nick of time. The footsteps of the night patrol were approaching. The gang took to its heels. The boys knew the neighborhood and the buildings that had no gatekeepers. At night, they slept in empty lofts. The best lofts were the ones with old rags or discarded mattresses that they could sleep on. If they couldn't find a loft that wasn't locked, they bedded down on the stairs. They found a loft that was open. A match scratched and a candle was lit. "Moshel," Srulik said, "I have more matches in my pocket." "Hold on to them," Moshel answered. "My pockets are stuffed full." Moshel took out some bread, and they sat down to eat. The menu was more sausage, bread, and water. Then they lay down to sleep. Srulik found a beat-up old mattress and dragged it over to Yankel's. One of the boys tried grabbing it from him. "Hey, Red, that's my mattress," he said. "Leave him alone," Yankel threatened. "It's his now." Yanko went to a crate in the corner of the loft and pulled out the old remains of an old army coat. Here, he said to Srulik, use it as a blanket. Srulik felt grateful for being taken under Yanko's wing. Lights out, Moshiel announced. One more minute. Just a minute, voices called. Put out the candle, Yanko said. Moshiel wet his 2 fingers with his mouth and snuffed out the flame. It was pitch dark. Darkness covered the streets of the Warsaw Ghetto. Since the German invasion of Russia, there was a blackout every night. In winter, when the skies were cloudy and it got dark before curfew, people bumped into each other in the street. Someone had the idea of coating pins with forfices, and whoever could afford one wore a pin that glowed in the dark. The pins came in human and animal shapes: dogs, cats, butterflies, birds, even chimney sweeps. Srulik envied whoever had one, although he begged his father for one. There was no money, and then one day he found a butterfly pin in the garbage. The more he left in sunlight during the day, the more it shone at night. He would put it on the windowsill, where it caught the sun's rays peeping over the roofs of the houses. At night, it gave off a greenish glow. He could even see the tips of his fingers if he held them close to it. It was quiet in the loft once the candle was snuffed out. They could hear the tenants of the building talking in muffled voices, the sounds of pots and dishes being washed, the creaking and banging of doors, and steps from the courtyard below. Srulik took out his shiny butterfly to push back the darkness, as he always did before falling asleep. Even after he shut his eyes, the world was less black then. There was enough light to remember and dream of all the things he had seen during the day. What do you have there? Yanko asked. A glow pin, Srulik said. Let me see it. Srulik groped for Yanko's hand and gave it to him. I found it in some garbage. You did a good day's work, Srulik, Yanko said, handing it back to him. What will you do with the vodka? Sell it? There was a moment's silence, then Yanko asked, How come you joined us? I was looking for food in the garbage with my mother. She disappeared. Yanko sat up. You have a mother? He asked wonderingly. Yes, Srulik said. He didn't see anything so special about it. Word spread through the loft that the red-headed boy had a mother. All the boys gathered around him. They wanted to hear about her. What did she look like? What did she give him to eat? Is she pretty? Srulik couldn't say what his mother looked like. He had never thought if she was pretty or not. Yes, he said. She's not dead? No. He felt sure of that. Then where is she? I guess at home. Then why aren't you with her? I don't know how to get there. You don't know the name of the street? No, he said sadly. You're not from Warsaw? No, we're from Blani. The Warsaw ghetto was large, not like the little ghetto in Blani. It had tall buildings and lots of streets. His new friends, he was told, came from the countryside too. Some had been separated from their parents during the deportation to Warsaw. Try to think, Yanko said. If you can remember where your house is, we'll find your mother for you. Where is your mother? Srulik asked. She's dead. My father died too, in Warsaw. Srulik stretched out his mattress. He wasn't used to sleeping by himself. He would have given anything to be in one bed again with his brother Duvid, who also kicked him and pulled the blanket. He could picture their building clearly. The entrance, the rickety wooden stairs, the door of their apartment, which was never shut during the day because of all the people coming in and out. He just couldn't remember how to get there, even though he could see his mother as though she was in front of his eyes. It was weird how someone could be so close and yet so out of reach. Before he knew it, it was morning. The biggest boys went out to sell the vodka and cigarettes and brought bread and sugar with the money. Srulik took a piece of bread, wet it, and dipped it in the sugar. The bread wasn't sliced as neatly as his mother's, but it tasted the same. The boys brought him to their friend, Yonich, the shoemaker, who sometimes made them tea in exchange for sugar. He was working in the doorway of the little cubbyhole that was his shoe shop. We have a new gang member, Yanko said, introducing Srulik. Yonich glanced up at him. Srulik smiled. The shoemaker reached out a calloused hand and gently took Srulik's chin. God has given you what not many people have, son, he said, looking first at Srulik's face and then at his shoes. I'm too busy today, but come another time and I'll mend your shoes for you. He has a mother, Yanko said. He just doesn't know where she lives. Yonich frowned. Telling Srulik to sit, he asked him what his street looked like. Like a street, Srulik said. Do you remember the number of the house? Yes, 10. And the name of the street? No. Look at that. Yonich pointed at a street sign. Did you have one of those on your street? Srulik looked at the sign and shook his head in sorrow. He couldn't remember. I'll go to the police, Yoni said. Maybe someone reported you missing. And you, he told Yanko, should take him around the ghetto. Maybe you'll hit the right street by chance. They finished their tea. Yankel took Srulik, and they crisscrossed back and forth through the crowded streets of the ghetto. Maybe it's this street, Yankel asked at each corner. No, Srulik answered each time. In the end, they gave up and rejoined the gang. Srulik was getting used to the new way of life, sleeping in lofts, roaming the streets, shoplifting by day, and breaking into stores before the curfew. The boys kept up their soccer games near the garbage bins, where Srulik lost his mother. Each time they returned there, Srulik looked to see whether his mother was waiting for him. Yonich kept his promise and went to the Jewish ghetto police, but no child had been reported missing. There was just a long list of nameless children who had died in the streets and were known only by the addresses of the houses by which they were found. Whenever their rovings brought them to a new part of the ghetto, Yankel asked, Srulik, was it near here? Srulik would look hard at his surroundings. He never recognized them. If he had stayed with Yankel's gang long enough, he might have found his house by the end. But one day, there were shouts in the streets, accompanied by harsh whistles of the ghetto police. A roundup! This was something new. The shouts came from men and women running from the police. They wanted to warn others. The streets emptied at once. Yankel led the gang through some backyards to another street. Let's ask Yoni, he said. Maybe he knows what it's about. Yoni was mending a shoe stretched upside down on a shoehorn. Everyone's shouting roundup, Yankel told him. Yoni nodded sadly. The Jewish police, he said, are rounding up Jews for the Germans and putting them on trains. It looks like they're planning to empty the ghetto. Trains for where? Resettlement. Where? Yoni pointed with a finger at the sky and moved his shoemaker's stool into his cubbyhole. I'm closing, he said. I have a wife and children to worry about. You boys should get out of the ghetto. Where to? The Polish side. I was already there, Srulik said. The Germans caught us. Get out, Yoni repeated. He locked the door, glanced at the keys in his hand, put them in his pocket, and went off. The boys sat on the sidewalk, talking things over. There's a gate to the ghetto that always has wagons by it, Yankel said. They come to haul away the garbage. Maybe we can hide in them. He led them to the gate. They followed him somberly, stopping to survey it from afar. There were 2 German soldiers armed with rifles and 4 policemen, 2 Poles on the Polish side and 2 Jews on the Jewish side. The wagons, hitched to the horses, stood inside the gate. The first to make it through, Yankel said, gets out at the first corner and waits for the rest of us. If there are more than 2 of you, you'll have to hide. For how long? For as long as it takes for us all to cross. If we don't all make it, go without us. Where? Search me. They split up. Srulik inched toward the wagons, which stood parked in a row inside the gate. One began to move. He jumped onto the back and burrowed into the pile of garbage. The smell didn't bother him. The farmer whose wagon it was heard the sound and turned around. For a second, as Srulik disappeared, their eyes met. The farmer hesitated. Then Srulik heard the crack of the whip and the cry. Giddy up! The wagon lurched over some cobblestones and stopped. There was Polish and German voices, and then they set out again. Then a German shouted behind them, Halt! The wagon came to a stop. A soldier ran toward it on studded boots. He made a German remark, and Srulik felt something cold slide past his right leg, rip his pants, and slice into the heap of garbage. It withdrew and plunged back into 2 more hair-raising times, one close to his head. Get a move on, the German said in Polish. There's no boy in there. The wagon set out again. The rattle of the wheels and the clip-clop of the horses' hooves made Srulik feel hopeful. But now came more shouts, this time far away. The wagon stopped once more. Srulik raised himself and peered out from the rear. A German soldier and a Polish policeman were running toward them, shouting and waving their hands. The farmer leaned back, yanked the frightened boy from his place, and set him down on the road. Srulik's first instinct was to run. The farmer said, Don't move, boy. I'll get you out of here. The policeman and the soldier were coming closer. Srulik froze. A shiver ran through him. The farmer bent over the horse with a knife and cut the harness strap. He swung Srulik onto the horse and mounted behind him, and they galloped off. 2 shots rang out. Srulik tried turning around to look, but the farmer gripped him tightly. When he finally caught a glimpse over his shoulder, the gate of the ghetto had vanished, and as had his soldier, the policeman, and the wagon. After a while, the horse slowed to a trot. The farmer relaxed his grip, and Srulik breathed a sigh of relief. It was the first horse he had ever ridden in his life. They left the city behind them. Before long, they were riding through the fields with woods on either side. Now and then they passed a solitary cottage. After a while, they came to a village of thatch-roofed houses. Each house had a vegetable garden with some fruit trees and small buildings around it. Srulik saw horses, cows, pigs, and chickens in the farmyards. Wash hung from laundry lines, and here and there an empty pot was drying upside down on a fence post. They rode through the village. A barking dog chased them. A woman sitting in her doorway with a child watched them go by. Boys played soccer on the road. The farmer reined the horse to a walk to keep it from kicking up dust at them. He didn't speak. Neither did Srulik. They left the village. Another village appeared on the horizon, and the farmer stopped and pointed. Srulik looked and saw several boys dressed in rags by a stream that sparkled in the sunlight. The boys noticed them and dived into the reeds along the bank. "Those are Jewish children," the farmer said. "Go to them." He dismounted and helped Srulik down, then took 2 cubes of sugar and a piece of bread from his pocket. He gave Srulik 1 cube and the bread and fed the other cube to the horse, patting its neck fondly. Putting his hand on Srulik's head, he made the sign of the cross over him and said, "May the Mother of God look after you." He mounted his horse and rode off. Srulik watched him go. He wanted to wave goodbye, but the farmer didn't turn around. Should he eat the bread and sugar together, or first one and then the other? He decided to eat the bread first. He chewed it as he watched the farmer grow smaller in the distance and vanish around a bend in the road. Then he ate the sugar.